I think I don't have to introduce the next speaker because most of us know him very well. James Lappin will have a presentation with the title of The Record System Loophole. James, what did you bring us today?
Oh, I brought you an algorithm.
Algorithm?
As you can see, it's a black box algorithm. Black box algorithms are the best type of algorithms to travel with. You don't have to keep them in the fridge, you just need to keep them in a black box, and everybody's got a black box. Okay, when we first started developing this algorithm, we had no idea that it would get this close to providing a records management solution. We didn't even intend it to be used as a solution. We purely intended it to be used as an analytics tool. An analytics tool at the request of one particular client. Okay, so this client was a very email-centric organisation, and the model that they operated was, this was the model that they used where, like everyone really, they obliged their staff to move any important emails into a record system and manage them as records in the record system. And the trivia and rubbish that was left in the email accounts were deleted after 2 years. We were called in because the chief executive suspected that many important emails weren't being moved to the record system. And she was worried that this meant that there were many decisions being made by that organisation that simply weren't recorded anywhere except for in the email accounts, which were deleted after 2 years. And she was uncomfortable about that. So what she said to us was that what she wanted to know was how badly was this policy operating. She said, if we could put some numbers around it, she could make some strategic choices, right? So if we came back and told her that 60 or 70% of significant business emails were going into the record system, then she'd know that some incremental change was required. You know, a bit more training, upgrade to a newer version of the record system, a bit more senior management support. Right? But if she found out that it was only 30 or 40% of business emails that were going into the record system, then she'd have to do something more radical. Okay. So we thought we'd do quick and dirty, find some figures. So we asked for 2 figures. What we wanted to know was, how many emails on average did each member of staff in that organisation send per day? We weren't interested in inbox, how many they received, because that probably depended on, how many mailing lists they were subscribed to. We wanted to know how many did they send during the course of a working day. And the other figure we wanted to know was, how many emails did each individual on average put into the record system? So we just got the global figures for number of emails sent per day and number of emails deposited in the record system, and divided it by the number of staff. Right? And what we found was the average number of emails sent per day was 32, and the average number of emails deposited in the record system was 0.5. Yeah? So on average, someone put an email into the record system every other day. Right? So we went back to the chief exec, and she said, look, I can't believe that I'm paying all these people all of this money, right, and they only produce 1 email every 2 days that's worth enough to put into the record system. She said, either they're sending 62 useless emails, and for every 1 significant email. She said, either we need to completely get rid of all the staff and get something more efficient, or we need to look at the processes here. At that point, her staff said, whoa, 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 because, look, with due respect, they said, look, can we just get some more information? Right, okay, so they found out that only 1 in 64 sent emails are going into the record system. But can we find out how many of those emails should go into the record system? Okay. And that's where the algorithm development started to take place, because of course there is none of the systems know what's a significant email or what not. So we worked with them first of all to define what we mean by significant. What is a significant business email? And we needed it to be simple enough that we could algorithmically program it, but also train it to individuals. And we ended up with using double-decker buses. Right? We agreed as an organisation that an email should go into the record system if the person who takes over your job after you've been run over by a double-decker bus would need to have access to it the following day. Right? Just simple as that. So they gave us a sample of 40 individuals, 40 members of staff, and we used a technology that's a bit like Siri. We rigged it up onto the devices that they primarily use to send emails. It was normally their PC and their phone, or their laptop and their phone. And it was triggered so that when they press send on an email, it would say, "Was that a business email?" And if they say yes, we would timestamp it. And if they said no, we would ignore it. And then we collected figures of how many per day, how many business emails that they were sending, and we kind of we did a control test with a control group. We got a compliance person and a records management person and a lawyer, just an ordinary person in the organisation, to just look at the choices they were making and check that they were reasonably okay, and retrain people if they were big divergences. Went back to the chief executive 2 months later, and she said, right, what's the figure? How many significant business emails are my staff sending per day? We said, do you want to know the average figure? She said, yes. We said 20. 20, okay. So there we have it, that 20 significant business emails sent per person per day, of which 0.5 was going into the record system. So in other words, the record system was capturing 2.5% of the significant business email of that organisation. So the chief executive asked the obvious question, what are we going to do about it? And the staff politely said to her, what do you think we should do about it? She said, I think we should get all 20 significant business emails every day moved into the record system. Okay, and then she looked at me and she said, can we use your tool to do it? And I said, well, you can use your tool to identify what should be moved. And then, yeah, of course, you can integrate with your record system. It happened to be SharePoint. You could integrate to SharePoint and you can push it to SharePoint. But of course, you'd have to re-architect your SharePoint system a bit to accommodate this stuff, because your SharePoint system is organised with document libraries for different types of work, and individuals don't necessarily map one-to-one to a particular document library, and the document libraries have got metadata fields, and the metadata fields of email isn't necessarily the same as the metadata field in the document library. And at that point, she grew impatient and said, I don't want to hear about that technical stuff. So she said, is it possible to do? And I said, well, if you wanted to, you could set up separate document libraries in SharePoint, and if those document libraries could have a content type which has metadata fields the same as the email metadata field. She said, I don't want to hear about that. And I said, all right. And that means you could move the correspondence into correspondence document libraries within your SharePoint environment, each one unique to an individual. Okay. She said, is that good records management practice? I said, it hasn't been badged as good records management practice in the past, but I guess a 98% non-compliance compliance rate with your records management policy implies that something different might be better practice than what you've got already. And you would have the advantage that that means that this model would actually be working, and that when the double-decker buses do strike, the new people that you get into your organisation could go to the record system and actually use all the correspondence, rather than it being locked up in email accounts, which also contain personal information, so that the person dead under the double-decker bus, his email can't be open to the new successors, because they might have personal information about other people who are still living because they weren't under a double-decker bus, and hence the information is still covered by the Data Protection Act. And then she got a bit irritated with me for my over-explanations. So she said, right, we'll do it. But then a couple of other voices in the room piped up. And one of them was the accounts manager, and he said, you know that means that we'll be storing 40% more email in our record system. And email already accounts for the bulk of the stuff in our record system, and therefore it probably means that our storage bill for this system will be 35 times more than our existing storage bill. And she said, ah. And then the Freedom of Information Compliance Manager said, and you also know that whereas at the moment we get rid of most of our email after 2 years, once you put it into the record system and it gets subject to retention rules, that means we're going to be keeping it for much longer, because actually almost none of our retention rules are 2 years. Almost all our retention rules are at least 7 years, and some of them are 15 years, and some of them are 20 years, and some of them are for a lifetime. And then the data protection person started piping up about the risk. You know, what about the risk? What if this algorithm that these consultants have come in and developed, what's the percentage chance of it making a mistake, and some personal email gets pushed into the record system and is now shareable to colleagues? And I said, well, we've thoroughly tested the algorithm, and it's got a 99.9% success rate, accuracy rate. And the chief executive said 99.9%, that's brilliant. And the risk manager said, so what you're saying is that for every 1,000 emails moved into the system, one will be an email that actually shouldn't be there because it's either trivial or personal. I said, yeah. And what you're saying is that 20 emails per day on average per person will go into this system. I said, yeah. So he says, but if we have 500 staff, that means that one trivial or personal email per day will go into your system. I said, yeah. So in other words, 7 times per week, no, 5 times per week, there's going to be a chance of a personal email going into that system. I said, yeah. And then the risk manager said, and what about political sensitivity? And I said, what about political sensitivity? He said, did you factor political sensitivity into your algorithm? I said, no, of course I didn't. I said, you just wanted me to know what was significant in business terms. The risk manager said, yeah, but what about if someone's on an important piece of work and is asked their opinion about something and gives their opinion freely and honestly, but it's not the type of opinion that we would want to have in our record system? Would your algorithm judge it to be significant or insignificant? I said, well, it sounds significant to me. He said, it is significant. I said, no, well, then we'd mark it as significant. He said, yeah, but we don't want it in our record system. And the risk manager turned to the chief executive and said, do you realise what you're doing here? If you deploy this algorithm, not only will you be getting personal information into your record system, but you'll also be getting unguarded and politically perhaps either embarrassing or even downright incriminating information into the record system. And then the risk manager turns to the chief executive and said, Chief Executive, honestly, would you be happy if tomorrow we took this algorithm and we ran it over your email account as the first email account, as the beacon, the pilot project for this new auto-classification project? And at that point, the chief executive asked for other options. Have you got any questions?
Really good talk, which wasn't a surprise. When you're looking at the algorithm, when you're talking to businesses about this, one of the things that I've come across recently in helping clients understand long-term impact of auto-classification is to do with disaster recovery. And if they want to put an auto-classification tool in and an individual's email account or an organisation's email account is compromised, many organisations are able to support that and stand it back up again very quickly. It's within minutes. But the problem that we then run into is if you did that for one individual, you risk taking a few extra records. But to your point about the exponential 20 records per person per day, etc., is if you have to stand up in the case of, say, one of the NHS trusts who suffered the WannaCry hack and you have to roll them back, you've got potentially hundreds of people's emails going into the record system again. Was that something that you looked at or are looking at, to say, can we have a double check? Have we got this already?
Sorry, Tim, to reflect back a question with a question, but so are you saying with business continuity, you don't just want to restore the whole email account? Are you saying there's a role for auto-classification inside?
No, so when you do roll back, so you restore everything so that everybody can go back to doing their job. Your auto-classification tool looks at the email account afresh, potentially, and says, oh, records, and moves them straight in, unguarded, moves them straight into the record system.
So in other words, you have a retrospective. So what you're saying is that the political sensitivity, you might be saying, the political sensitivity tool could be mitigated because you could say to people, look, from tomorrow, all your new emails tomorrow will be auto-classified, but here's a way by which if it's sensitive in whatever way and you're worried that the auto-classification might make a mistake, you can do this, you can wave your hand or flag it up in some way or whatever. But what Tim, if I'm rightly saying, is that even if you did that, then if someone's email account fell over, you restored, it would come in and the auto-classification tool would jump on it and
So it's fail-safe.
But I guess as a fail-safe, you should be able to switch off the auto-classification. So, of course, what you get is expediency versus governance. And just like with the chief executive's example there, when the risk manager put the chief executive on the spot, for good governance, you should treat your high-ups the same as you treat your low-downs. But for political expediency, you could, for very risky posts, switch off the auto-classification. But here it becomes interesting because that's a political question, political with a small p. Because if you're a civil society, you might trust the algorithm more than you trust individual staff moving the emails across. Mr. Gollins.
How would you contrast your 20 out of 32 for everybody with the US government capstone, take everything from the top end of the hierarchy?
Yeah, because if I'd have continued the dialogue could have come on with the chief executive saying they didn't like auto-classification, what are the alternatives? And one of the alternatives would be what we might in shorthand call the capstone approach, which is we don't try to move individual emails into record systems. In fact, we give up managing email at an individual message-by-message approach entirely, and we manage them on an email account basis. And That approach that Tim mentions was prompted not by an organisation themselves, but by an archive, and it was by an archive, the National Archives and Records Administration of the US, saying, actually, we don't trust this, and therefore, we want to make sure that we've got email accounts for the most senior people. And so the way I think that dialogue would have gone in the boardroom would have been, the chief executive would have said, what's the advantage for us as an organisation in that? And the people around the table said, well, there isn't any advantages for us, because the problem with email accounts is because of the personal information problem. When someone leaves, you can't transfer that email account to the next individual because you can't separate the personal information from it, unless you've got one algorithm, or you've and had a manual process to do so. And therefore, an organisation keeping its senior boardrooms and senior policy staff emails for 20 years, they probably only got 3 or 4 years worth of use out of that, and then the minute the staff have left, they've got 16 years where they're getting no use of the account, but they're having to answer discovery requests, whether that be FOI, DPA, legal, whatever they're subject to. So you said there's just no interest for it, but it's something I think archives should be interested in, because, yeah.
So what you're saying is what I read from that is you're saying the archive's interest in email and the risks for the archive will be very different from the corporation or the business's need for email and the risks that accrue.
I think it puts an archive in a difficult position, because they're in between civil society and government. If they say to government, we don't trust your record keeping with email, please preserve the important email accounts, government's not going to be happy. And if they're honest with their citizens and say to their citizens, look, even if someone's doing a really important job, even if someone's like policy lead on, you know, you name it, nuclear power, economic policy post-Brexit, you name it, we are still not going to capture their email account, and we've got no confidence that anything other than a derisory minority of their correspondence goes into the record system, then civil society would be upset. And if historians were litigious, which they're not, there'd probably be, some calling into question about whether it's legal under the Public Records Act. Thank you very much, Zoltan.
Thank you indeed, James. Big applause.